Okay, so when you get the welcome screen, just click OK through it. Don't open anything. This is your basic interface of InDesign, right? I have my right panel, which has basic kind of navigation items. The major ones are going to be your major players for what we will do on design practices is going to be, your pages, your layers, your links. Doing like arrows and stuff, you'll definitely use strokes and colors and color swatches. One thing you don't have on there is this background task, and I'll show you how to do that and how to use that. If I go to window, right, if there's something I need and I don't see, right, I can grab it from that window menu and I can begin looking at all the other things I can use, right? So if I want to look at styles, I want to look at pages, output, anything else I want, it's there. Those are the ones I generally use, unless I'm doing like an interactive PDF. Honestly, I don't do much drawing in InDesign, unless it's doing like arrows or things like that. And I've even migrated beyond, and I like Microsoft Visio for my diagrams nowadays because it automatically draws my arrow on that. So then, at least for this, make sure you go to Utilities. Make sure you have background task checked. What that'll do is it'll bring up a window that looks like this. And then when I want to drag that over and dock that, call that docking the menu. Now, workspace-wise, you can save this workspace if you want on your personal computers. If you save it here, it's just going to get overwritten when the computer shuts down anyway, so don't worry about it. And the one I typically use more often than not is the interactive for PDF, because it has things that I use for navigating my PDF document, which is hyperlinks, bookmarks, buttons and forms, media, yada 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 yada. So that's a better one to use. It has everything you need. It has background tasks on there. I can actually drag that down to the bottom for my particular layout. Now, the idea of a link in InDesign is that if anybody has had the experience with trying to write a very long document in Microsoft Word, when you start placing images and captions and all those things, Microsoft Word, after about 100 pages, does not like you when every page has a graphic on it. And that's because the graphic actually lives inside the file. Adobe's solution, an InDesign solution to making large page sizes and large image graphics all come together in one seamless piece, is to establish this idea of a link. And that link can be determined as dynamic, which means that if I update that file, like if I make a rendering and I change the color of something and I overwrite that file with the same name, it'll automatically update my InDesign file, right? And all I have to do is reprint. I don't have to worry about replacing that picture in the document or anything else. And it also keeps my file size down in my file to make it actually navigable, so I can put together a 100-page portfolio at the end of it all and be okay with it. So yeah. Who's not familiar with the term of a layer and what a layer does? Does everybody understand the concept of layers? Who doesn't understand the concept of layers? Oh, good. Cool. So we'll be using layers. Almost every design software we use, minus like the Microsoft suites, is based on layers, right? This idea of things go on top of other things in order, and arranging them and grouping them together based on layers. Again, coloring objects, line weights sometimes to adjust them inside InDesign. So getting started with InDesign, again, this is like bare bones, crash course, everything you're going to need in probably a half hour of InDesign. So that's literally about all it took for me, and this is mostly what I ever use InDesign for. You'll probably get more advanced than me at one point than it is. So, and I hope you get there. So 3 things I can do with a new document in InDesign is that I'm going to either make a document, which is this bare bones document. I have pages up to another thing. If I'm getting like digitally savvy and doing like graphic design for somebody, or making a book or a pamphlet or anything like that, you're going to choose book because it has a different set default template styles. And then you have library documents. Really, for our purposes, I always just start with document, right? Simple, straightforward. Now, two things. We're going to pause from what I'm doing on the screen from what you're doing. There's two really major important key points on this. And you're really only caring about this section right here for now. Again, you can adjust your margins right here to begin with. So, I mean, really setting up the document, I guess, is really, really important to begin with. But we can always go back and change it. So it's not the end-all, be-all when you get to this document. The key thing is making sure you set up facing pages versus non-facing pages. So, does anybody know what a facing page is? Didn't think so. Okay, so let's go ahead and start. And you don't have, just pay attention here so I can explain facing pages real quick instead of doing it on your own. I'm going to do like 4 pages to start. Again, we'll talk about this in a minute, but facing pages is really important. So I'm going to turn off facing pages first. And that gives me, when I look at my pages flyout, that gives me 4 pages because I told it to give me 4 pages, and they're singular pages. When I do a facing page, so here's how you change the thing after I've already set up my document. I go File, Document Setup, and when I change that back to facing pages, what happens is now, if you look at my page structure here, it's giving me 2 pages side by side. So that's assuming that I'm making it like a book, right? I go turn the page, and I turn the page. And a lot of times this makes a difference because if I'm like, depending on what my binding is for that book, right? Maybe I'm going to send it to Lulu for printing on my own, my self-publish, or I'm going to go to Kinko's and I'm going to put a spiral bound on it, right? There has to be a layer of tolerance on your graphics, so you'll always see that my margins and my gutters become more increased from the center and increased from the center this way, and then I can start laying out. So then I have to basically do 2 master pages, and we'll talk about master pages in a minute as well. So just being aware of how you're going to be printing your document is really key on either facing pages or non-facing pages. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel all that and do a completely new document. So for you starting out, since we don't know and you typically don't know what you're doing, and since you can always go back and change that, to start out, pretty much most of what we're going to do is 11 by 17 prints, unless we do like a midterm board. Those will be a little different in a hybrid. 11 by 17 is pretty much industry standard. You get a lot more information on the page. If I'm doing like a handout, I'll do 8.5 by 11. So we'll start with a number of pages of 4. No facing pages, make sure you deselect that. My page size would be tabloid, so tabloid's 11 by 17. If I don't know what those names mean, InDesign's weird. It gives you things in point values for dimensions, where designers, architects be thinking feet and inches, or meters and centimeters and all that stuff. So my width would be 17 IN for inches. Height 11 inches, and it'll automatically convert it as long as I put the IN identifier on it. And then you go ahead and hit enter. That gives me my page spread. So if you open the pages flyout, so again I have pages, links, layers. Those are my 3 main ones. On the pages, there's a few key concepts that are going on. First is, so we don't get confused in how we're setting up our document. To zoom in and zoom out of our pages, it's Control plus and Control minus. So Control plus goes in, Control minus goes out. So when I'm looking at page views, I'm typically about here, macro scale, because I'm trying to look at when I lay out my content, I look at, okay, what does it look like in relation to the next page, to the next page, to the next page. It's just the way I design pages, I guess. And plus, you'll see that when I start talking about masters versus actual pages, it helps to know that I'm at a master page versus a actual layout page, because sometimes it gets cloudy. I wish there should be a way to make it so the master page looks a little different, but we'll get into that as we get more time into it. Yes?
Could you repeat the size?
Oh, 17 inches wide by 11 inches tall. Yep. Everybody, yeah, I had something. I'm gonna rip through this, so so don't worry if I'm going too fast for anybody. Let me know. I'll pause for a minute. Good? Okay. Alrighty, back to it. Alright, so now what a master page is if you've done any type of document processing, think of it like a header and a footer. When I make a document, my header is always the same from page to page to page. My footer, always the same from page to page to page, right? So that is set up in InDesign. Instead of calling it a header and footer, we can just automatically design it out ourselves. So in that top pages flyout is master pages. So master pages are where you make things that are going to occur on every page. You set them up prior to it. So let's go ahead and make a new master that we can then apply to our pages. So right click, and we're going to do new master. And I'm going to give it a prefix, so in case you're working in an office, this would be ID for interior design set. You put a dash on it if you want or not. You can call it master. I'm going to call mine tutorial for now, so I know it's the tutorial one. And if I wanted to copy this new master from an existing master file, I can base it on one of those. How many pages are there of this master set am I using? Typically one is fine, because that's how we set up our document, right? We're not doing facing pages. And then I just go ahead and click OK. So then you'll see that opens up my master document. So when I want to change between placing content and creating content on my pages, you always want to be coherent enough to know that if I click here, sometimes I'm zoomed in like this, and when I have it zoomed in like this and I go to click and double click and edit my master page, there's literally no designation unless I have content already on there on what is actually happening. So just be aware that when I want to make something happen globally to every page, I'm double clicking in the master area and that opens that up, and then I zoom out. And typically you'll know, because if I zoom out far enough I won't see the consecutive pages below that. I always make that mistake, so I reiterate it. Sometimes you're just going so fast you accidentally make mistakes. So the next thing is beginning to set up like guides and things like that. So everybody should have the ruler visible. If I don't want to see the ruler, which I don't know why you would, we're architects, why we would not want to see the ruler. But again, as I can go to the view menu and I can hide rulers or turn them on, everybody should see their rulers. I can click and drag my ruler down. That's going to drag a guide out. And I can line that up pretty much wherever I want. If I click and drag it again, I can move that. So I can use it. You'll see on the left-hand side here, right, I can begin tracking that on where I want it. There. Yeah. And I'm going to drag off two other ones. So I'm going to have text that gets lined up for changing text on pages. So I'm going to change the title of the particular sheet. And then I have another area that's going to occur on all my master sheets, right? That's going to be the thing that says, I am this project, I belong to this person, blah, 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 blah. Stuff that's going to always be on every page, okay? And you can put them wherever you want for now, if you're following along. And I can do it to my heart's content, as many as I want. One other particular thing to keep in mind, if I go back to that view menu, going to my grids and guides section, making sure that those three columns are checked. Lock column guides, snapping to my guide. And another really nice thing is smart guides. When I have smart guides on, that's going to make sure that if I'm trying to line up images from page to page to page, as long as I zoom out far enough, it'll begin tracking other pages' content with my new page's content. So I can get things lined up without having to kind of try and eyeball it, right? It gets more exactitude to these things. If you have not already set up guides to begin with. All right, so just make sure those are on so they're snapping. Now, still in my master design page, let's make some text, give it some colors, things like that. So if I go to T for text, I'm just going to arbitrarily make a box for my text box. So you always have to make the text box first. And just like any word software or word processing software, right, I can change the font, paragraph styles. You know, that's part of your homework, is to explore creatively all those things. Or, you know, even the design of text is important, should be important to you. I use a font of Able. You probably don't have it. It's a font for everything I do. I particularly like it. And for the sake of the tutorial, I'm just going to say that I am the title, right? And if I zoom in close on that, right, I capitalize certain words and change colors of certain words, so on and so forth, if you'd like to. Right, I can select that, and let's say I want to change the color of the word title while in that text box. I can do that as well. To do so, there's two little hidden little areas. Now I can do it based on the color menu at the right. If I do it that way, that's one way to do it. Another way I can do it is straight up here at the options bar, I'll call it. And I can change text that way as well through pre-designated swatches. So one is going to allow me to do it based on, well, both get me to the same menu essentially. One is, I guess it's just less clicks. To me, I never really use the color on the right flyout. I probably should more often. It's just I'm more accustomed to going up, similar to the way Illustrator works and Photoshop works, of just coming in and, you know, seeing where my T is for my text or my object for object and saying that's the fill color. I drag that out, and then I have my fill colors. Now, as you get more versed with these things and learning and building your own personal libraries, like for safety's sake, I make a fresh install so I don't have all my customizations in InDesign, so I can teach you how to do those things. For now, is, you know, if I want to, I have a full-on library, and what's nice is Photoshop even comes with its own color library swatches, so things that you use all the time, you'll want to start making your own swatch libraries with. Again, you know, we're not here to like do uber InDesign experts. We're just here to get our jobs done. So to make a new color swatch, right, I select a current color, and then I say right next to the trash bin underneath the color swatches is what I'm determining to be a post-it note, which means duplicate my swatch. And then if I want to edit the color of that swatch, I double click on it. And now let's talk about RGB versus Pantone versus CMYK and how we manipulate color. So, and somebody say something? Okay, so who can, and we'll talk definitely more in depth next week on this, but to give you the gist of this is, let's think about RGB space. So what is the difference between RGB and CMYK? See if anybody knows. You know?
RGB is for computers,
Fantastic, exactly. In a nutshell, RGB is the way that light is mixed to create color. Digital monitors are light-based objects. And CMYK is how physical colors are mixed on printers and such. So when I go to get a paint, a gallon of paint, when they tell the computer to go mix that gallon of paint, they have 4 colors of paint that are coming down and mixing all the colors that you see, right? So, and that's what your paint value is on the top. When I go to like a Pantone color chart, most of the time your Pantone color charts are based on CMYK values. Since everything that we do out of InDesign, like 95% of it is going to be printed out, we always use CMYK. Now, we'll find out next week how this changes, like the look of blacks, right? So black is never really black, and I have to catch myself sometimes. So I just leave it at CMYK. If you want to get, you know, maybe you come in and you have a particular project that's already using based, right, your Pantone bases, right, it's simulating the color effect as if I had a gloss versus a non-gloss item. So a red that's glossy red is always going to be interpretively different than a matte red, even though they're the same color mix. So paying attention to that is really good too. So if you want to look at color libraries, you can do that as well. This will also be discussed briefly in your readings. But again, like I said, default CMYK is fine. And then I want orange. You know, I've been into orange lately. Orange is a great color. Go Bears. You Chicago natives. So I'm going to try and start mixing and seeing what those do to get my orange, right? And then what orange do I want? How much yellow do I want in my orange? How much red do I want in my orange? So, right, no cyan, all yellow, and then I balance with magenta for that. Get my orange. And I don't know, maybe we'll go like that orange today. And how dark do I want that? How much black do I want into that? For me, no black. Alright, so then let's click OK. We'll talk again about process and spot colors when we get into Photoshop. Click OK. And there we go. I am the title. Okay. And yes, orange looks gross. Okay, so that's the gist of changing colors. Now, you know, we're going to talk about drawing and all that stuff, and you know, again, if I want to make a rectangle, you don't have to do this. By default, my rectangle comes out as a stroked value, right? So again, to change that, it's up here. So now you'll see what is the value of my thickness of line weight. If I want it really, really thick, I can make it really, really thick. If I don't want to make it really, really thick, I can say I don't want to have any stroke value and say there's none, so I have an invisible rectangle, and I can do it just as all fill. So I can do that as well. Alright, and if I pull that down over my text, you'll see objects, even though you won't see me use layers at this point in InDesign, even though I probably should. You'll be putting objects on layers versus text layers, yada yada yada. For me, when I'm doing like just base things, right, if I want to arrange objects really quickly, I can right click on that object, and then there's an arrange function, send backwards, send to back, so on and so forth. Move my text up there. Right. Another way, if I double click in my text box, and let's say I want to color that whole box, I should be able to double click inside of it, right? So I'm editing text currently. If I select with my select marker, which was right at there, select tool is always right there. And if I select just my text box itself, I can color that entire text box and kind of omit the process of drawing the rectangle. Contrast with color. Right. Now, talking about how this text box works, when we get into placing objects, this box is a lot different than a Photoshop shape handle. So shape handles are the little squares you see at the corner of most rectangles and objects, right? I can change this to my heart's content. Typically, I align it to what I know my object's going to be on the size I want for now. We can leave this where it is if you'd like to, or you can move it, you can delete it, whatever you'd like. I'll cancel that. I'm going to zoom out so I can see my whole entire board, right? Starting to work quickly with this. Right, so maybe I want a color band of red down there. You know, probably never would do it like this, but for safety's sake, let's just do it like that. Then I would drag my text box down to where I want it there as well. Right, oops, my text isn't big enough, so I'll make it to the area I want to take up on my text. Double click inside my text. Select my text object again, the type tool, so that way when I'm inside of it, I can select my text and then I can size it appropriately once I have it in place. You know, simple operations, kind of quickly moving through it. And then I'm going to leave this open because this is where I'm going to leave like my dynamic. I am the title, or I am the identifier of my particular thing. If I were going to be doing this myself. Okay. Simple, simple, simple. Again, justification, right? I can select that text, and I can justify that as well. Here's your paragraph options here. Another window that's really, really helpful, I think, especially with typography. You should watch the movie Helvetica. Is this paragraph? So I want to go to view. To get window should be type and tables. If I click on paragraph, right, that brings up my paragraph window. I end up with a lot more options than I typically would have, right? I have all kinds of different things I can do with my text, right? So let's say I want to, even though I have it the right size, I still want to fill the whole entire space, right, of that. So that's where this comes into play, is how much do I want to go. And spacing wise, it's going to be indentation, should be there. Oh no, that's the other part. Do that. So, bullets and numbering, hyphenation. It might not be, it could be under character too. So let's go under character. It's a character menu as well. So that's the one. So paragraph is how the text is grouped together. Character is how I spread the text out among that. And I lost my text. So let's undo what we just did. Then under character, so character is one you want to keep over there too when you're doing some of this stuff. So I can change the spread of that text out over the whole entire segment. There's no real auto-fit function. If I can squeeze them together really tightly, or I can spread them out a lot if I want to. I can even go farther beyond that, or I can spread out only single words if I'd like to, like title is spread out farther than the other ones. Really, really, really far with it. 400, right? Typography. What is my spacing from line to line? Is it in metrics? Line to line spacings here. Fortunately, some fonts will allow you to go bold. Other fonts will not let you go bold, depending on what you have installed. Okay, so those are some other ways you can change that. And there's a variety of things you can do. I mean, you can type text on paths and all kinds of fun stuff with it. Hey, for this, I don't really want you to go too crazy with it. It's really just about doing a nice, simple design title block that says I am me kind of deal. All right, so that's enough for my master page. Right, I go back to my pages flyout, and you can see I'm still highlighted on this. If I open up my first page by double-clicking on it, and if I zoom out of this, you'll see I still don't see my title block, and that's because we have two different masters. I have a blank master, and then I have the master I just applied. So what I can do is select all my pages that I want to apply my new master to. So this is how I have different things happening on different pages. Right click on those pages, and it should say apply master to pages, and I can say 2 pages, all pages. Oh, I selected the wrong one. Make sure you apply the right master. So there should be a drop down menu. That's ID tutorial, and then you'll see that applies with my guides and everything else, right? If I wanted to change text so now I have my set taken care of. I want the right side from my master to still look like this here, right? But I just want it over here, and I want to have that be the part that I change from page to page to page. So I can copy from master content into page content. So if I double click inside there, select my text box, Control C, and I double click back to my page, my first page, and Control V. Whenever you paste something in InDesign, typically it just shows up at the center by default. There's always a level of, when I'm in page space, I'm always moving objects around. What's nice is when you'll start to see, when I start to move this guy, you'll see that Smart Guides is tracking where the center of my page is, right? So I can hit it dead center from those markers, right? Or I can just get it snapped and aligned to my bottom left document area. I am the title. I am the identifier. And whoops, doesn't fit inside there. It automatically hyphens it for me. I just go to character again and change that. Let's call it I am identity. That fits. And make sure you always spell things correctly, including my name, if you put it on your board. Cool. Now, in terms of InDesign will handle all types of different content. That's what's great about it. It handles color profiles for printing very, very well. It's like the end-all goal for things. So it'll take raster graphics, it'll take PDF vector drawings, and it assembles them in a way that's really, really quite nice, actually. It doesn't rasterize our vector drawings, but it also handles rasterization pretty well. So it's a really, really nice way. So how we place content onto our boards. Is I go to File, and I go to Place. And hopefully somewhere on your computer you have like some like sample images. Does everybody have like a sample images folder? Do Macs even come with sample images like Windows do? They're so cheesy sometimes. So I mean, pick something. If you want to go to the internet, you can. You can pick a PDF. Actually, I have a JPEG from today's stuff. So if I go to Lecture, right, we have that analysis JPEG you can use if you don't. Actually, I don't think I want to go to my photos folder. It's computer. So I'm just going to select the JPEG. Now, the first set is I'm not going to, and this is key for everything we're going to do from here on out, is you always have to pay attention to the dialog boxes. And this is especially true with Revit. Photoshop is a big one on dialogues, not as much as the Autodesk softwares have become, but your dialogues are huge. So don't just quickly click through everything and then be like, well, crap, that thing don't work now like it's supposed to. Make sure you read the dialog boxes. So on this one, I want to make sure I check Show Import Options. Why that isn't checked by default, I have no idea, because I guess there must be some keyboard shortcut that I'm missing personally. But I always have to remember to check Show Import Options. I believe it's stored with the file once you do check it. And I'm going to go ahead and click Open. So what that does is just gives me a preview. When we do multi-page PDFs, which we'll do as well next, I can go ahead and change it based on color. So right now my color profile is in an RGB color space. Do I want to leave my color profile the same, or do I want to convert it? Typically, you're just going to leave it as is. And we'll get into next week why we change it and when we change those things. Just click OK. And what that does then is, whoops, I had my text layer selected. So in the event you have, when you're placing objects, if I have some other type of shape handle already selected when I go to place objects, it'll automatically place it inside there and replace your content. So make sure you don't do that. So I can do Control Z if I accidentally do that. When I accidentally do that, it brings up then what you should see if you did it correctly, which is the little thumbnail of the image. And for me, when I'm doing graphics, sometimes things come in at different sizes and everything else. I just usually click off to the side and place it. Since this was previously 11 by 17 anyway and made with InDesign, that should be fine. And then I can line that up to my heart's content on my page. Or, now, some other things about this. So, typically, the way Photoshop works is you would want to rescale this next thing, right? That's the next common thing we do. So we want to change the size of the image. Unfortunately, InDesign handles the way you would think about sizing it as a clipping path. So it's already got an embedded logic as a clipping path within it. To change the size and scale proportionately, instead of doing the clipping path, I have to hold down Control, Shift, and then the mouse button over the shape handle, and I can rotate and scale that to my heart's desire. If I want to move within that clipping path, so let's say I make a clipping path that's a square, and I want everything to be squared, but then I want to, it's like I don't know what kind of content I want to actually show out of that image. I can double click inside of that frame, and I can move my items around as such as well. When I get to a point where I'm like, oops, I've done so much editing, I want to go back to the original thing I had. If I double click and right click inside of that, there's a fitting option. I can go to fit, and I can just say fit content proportionally to that new clipping window. And it'll get me back to a point where I can scale that proportionately again. Okay. Now that's I believe this is actually both raster and vector for this. If I zoom in really far on my image, you'll see that it's handling what looks like a really junky kind of anti-aliasing function. Don't worry about that yet. I'll show you how to toggle that on and toggle that off. Let's go open a PDF, right? So let's add some like vector drawings to our page. If I go ahead and go File, Place, or Control D on the computer. Let's go ahead and select the construction document example you should have downloaded. And again, always make sure Show Import Options is checked. Select that, click on Open. And now it's going to give me the ability to select page ranges, right? What pages do I want to drag in? So I'm going to say I want range, not 144 pages. We're not going to recreate the PDF in there. Let's just pick a random page. I'm going to say 24, right? 24. Or I can do preview page 24, which is not coming up as much of anything. I'm just gonna go for it. You can also change the visible layers versus all layers. So in a PDF, when we produce that from AutoCAD, sometimes it takes a while for the previews to process. From AutoCAD, I can still have layers to be toggled on and off, and you'll see that when we get to AutoCAD. So in this case, I want to do just all layers. So then when I do that, voila, there comes my image. So it'll actually bring in different layer data for you based on what's in that PDF. Do I want a transparent background or not? Most of the time I do want a transparent background with vector drawings. I can look at the layers. I can keep that, or I can use the PDF later visibility. Again, helpful when you're working with AutoCAD documents or PDFs from AutoCAD. And I'm going to say that I want I'm going to say, you know what, for this I'm going to do pages 24 to 27. So we have then 3 pages. So we can do a multi-page spread at the same time. And in that case, I would need to do a range 24 to 27. And then click on OK. Hopefully we don't have anything else selected when we do that, because it will replace that on accident to us. Cool. And then I'm just going to click arbitrarily off to the side. You'll see sometimes when I click, if I click too fast, right, it comes out as like a really, really small document, right, when it should look like that. In the event that happens to you, just Control-Z will backward step the last operation. Control-Z, backward steps. Control-C, backward steps to my original. Go 1. It's going to take it a minute because just load today. 2. Next page. And then 3 for the next page. And then if I want to, let's say on this, right, I'm getting to a point where the working space is like not enough. Again, Control-Shift to size. And I'm down on the other page here. I've lost my content, which is crazy. So I'll drag that back up. So there's a level of kind of labor intensiveness that you have to go through. But for this one, I got 1 page up here. This one, I can change the scale either graphically, which is using the mouse button, or I can come in and just do a scale at the top and say I want 25% of the original scale, so I get things the same size. Within that, if I select 2 objects, so let's say I have a bunch of things together, I want to make those 2 objects always stay. Whenever I select one, I want to select the other one. You can group objects together. Go to Object, Group. Right, so now when I grab one, I grab, excuse me. When I grab one, I grab the other one, goes together, and then I can actually scale both of those according to what I want from that one, and put them on the drawing. When I'm happy with what I want on the document, right, I can lock my objects so they don't move on me. So I don't know how many times I have things move, and to keep myself from resetting things up that I've already set up, go to Object, Lock. And then if I want to unlock, I can just unlock. Things I use quite often inside this. Things you'll also need kind of for your diagramming, and we'll get into more of this with Illustrator too. You know, drawing arrows. So if I have a line, I want to draw a line. If I want to draw the line straight, I hold down Shift, right? snapping is a problem with InDesign so much, insofar as it just is difficult to do sometimes. And if I go to my stroke value, on that line, there's like join conditions here, so that's where I handle my join conditions. There should be also the ability to make ends. So if I look at my line with it selected, there's a start and an end. So that's where my arrows go. So I can say I want an arrow that way, or at the other end of it, I want it that way. Right? So that's how we do arrows with that. What else is pretty important at this point? Oh, printing it, and also the overprint preview. So if I zoom out, once I have drawn an arrow or two on my project here, when I go to the view menu, there's this thing called an overprint preview. We'll talk about proofing setup and proofing colors when we talk about Photoshop, because technically you shouldn't have to do this if you do everything in Photoshop prior or Illustrator. And the overprint preview, let's zoom in on our vector drawings that we brought in. So when I look at my vector drawings, remember what they looked at like when we showed them on the screen? And then this is what happens to vector drawings when you bring them into Photoshop. They end up like this jumbled, nasty mess. When you look at that, you're going to be like, oh crap, didn't Craig say this is what he doesn't want out of us? Well, InDesign is just handling it differently because it needs to not have to process all that vector line work, right? Because what vector is it's really storing points in space and always calculating it so I can move it dynamically. In this case, how InDesign handles it is the thing of overprint. So if I click on overprint preview and I turn that off, all of a sudden my vector quality is back. So it will print this way. It's not showing you that quality because it's trying to give you the ability to not use CPU resources, essentially. Right? All right, so let's do one other thing, because you can always download this again. Is I'm going to take an image here, if I can. We'll talk about linking and everything else next time we place things. Also, okay, so the last thing is two ways to save this out. Next week, again, we'll talk about file structure and things like that. What's nice is InDesign will package up all this together. So all the things you do today, if you were to take this InDesign file, because objects are linked inside of the file, if I take just the InDesign file to another computer, it will not find those links. And you'll be like, where's all my stuff? So the first thing to do is always, if you're going to transmit the file to another computer, go File, Package. And what that does is, if I just click on Package, it'll ask me to save it. What that is going to do is going to take all the links that are assembled into the document and pre-compile a nice composed file structure for you, which to me is actually perfectly fine. I actually like the way InDesign does it. Makes things clean, cut, and simple. When you're working in an office setting, you typically don't do this, but since we're working individualized as lab computers to home computers, just get in the habit of packaging it up, even if it overwrites those files. And I'm going to call it whatever I want, Class 01. Whoops. Class 01 tutorial InDesign. And you can save it in your own jump drive or your Dropbox or wherever else you'd like. In mine, I'm going to put it on my Dropbox into my tutorials. Save it. Instructions, don't worry about it. If you want to get like super jazzy and author your stuff, go ahead. I would do it personally. And then the last part of this is it's asking you to make a folder. So I say yes. Now again, always pay attention to dialogues. So if you're working off a company server and you want to get in the habit of packaging things, you don't necessarily have to have copy linked graphics. If you have it checked, what that will do is copy everything that's been linked into that file into its own nice little folder and then repath the link. So then everything always goes in the link file. So usually the defaults are fine here, so just pay attention to them, make sure you understand them. Yeah. It'll also copy fonts, so I don't know how many times I get things from people with some weird font and it hasn't copied the font, and then it doesn't open and I can't read it. And nothing will show up. The only thing you'll do is you'll go back and check your file structure back at DM1 tutorials. Right, so here's my InDesign folder, and you'll see now it's done and taken my custom font and copied that over. Whoops. Back. Copied over let's go back to that folder. Copied over all the links that were in that file, so my analysis and that PDF itself it copied over. So now I can take it to another computer, it'll open up and I can edit it and it'll look just fine. The other part of this is preparing it to actually print out, right? So printing, I believe you guys have gotten a tutorial on printing already here. Yes? No? No? Okay, I will do that then too for you. Not today. Just print 11 by 17, or we can look at it digitally. But from here on out, we'll always print. Our water. Okay, so the final part is actually printing it to PDF, so I have a record copy in time of this object. Typically, the PDF presets are just fine. When we get into like really high-end graphics, always doing a high-quality print isn't necessarily needed to happen. I see too many times I get hand-ins from students that are like 500 megabytes for your poster, and it's like, whoa, man, you obviously were not listening the whole class. I've had things 24 by 36 look beautifully high resolution at 72 DPI print super quick, and it's only like 3 megabytes. Right, so if you're encroaching your PDF size after you print this thing out to be 500 megabytes, you probably want to go back and look at it or consult me, and we can talk about how to manage that process. And that's something we'll also always be talking about through the entirety of the course. For now, just do high quality print. It's fine. Not too much content in here. And it's going to ask you to save it out as a PDF. I'm going to save it in my same folder structure. And it's going to ask me what pages do I want to print, right? I can do arrange, I can do all. Some other things we'll really always talk about. Now, depending on, the thing I always end up changing is because I'm going from printer to printer to printer and different people's printers, is a lot of times I have to manage color, so I get a good replica of the same picture, like whether I print it at Kinko's or I print it at this place here, Columbia, or I'm printing it at IIT, or I'm printing at my home office, is making sure that I'm handling color profiles correctly. For today's stuff, not really important. We haven't touched on it yet, but that's like next in the list, being very cognizant of color reproduction. So for this, the general settings are fine on the default. Go ahead and click on export. And if you look at your background tasks, right, it should have that coming up, right? Hopefully you bring up background tasks, and it'll show me how long this is taking. So I always have a clue on how long it's going to take. Because it's processing raster graphics, it should take a little longer than most. And sometimes it'll open on its own, other times it won't open on its own, depending on what your dialog settings were. In my case, I didn't have it open on its own because sometimes I just don't want it to open. And I can go ahead and click on my PDF, and there's my title with my images and my lines and all kinds of fun stuff for the tutorial. Okay, so your assignment, in addition to the what was I going to say? In addition to doing your groups and getting your group project underway, is we're going to start setting up title blocks for your portfolio. So that way we get this done and out of the way, and you're going to bring them to class and we're going to talk about it. And I want to design title block. When you Google title block, the minute you put in title block, whether you put design in front of it or not, you're going to get like the architectural title block that you see on the construction documents. That's not what I want. I want you to give me a title block that describes you in some way, shape, or form. And it's something you're going to go back and change depending on the project, right? Sometimes we do it per project or we do it per person. For this, give it a go. Don't be afraid to fail, because everybody's going to do it wrong the first time anyway. There might be one or two that I'm like, this is awesome. They're fantastic, and I use you as an example. Otherwise, just give it a shot. Get comfortable with InDesign for me, and that'll be it. Last part is I will be sending out those books to you this weekend. Your job is to also, the ITN book is really a short read, so make sure you read that too as well, okay? I won't pop quiz you, don't worry. Maybe I will, I don't know. Other than that, it's 4:45. Damn, hit it. That one up. Right on that. Cool, we're done. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'll be around for another 10, 15 minutes, so feel free to ask. Otherwise, we'll see you next week, ladies and gentlemen.